Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of the Emerald Planet and EmeraldPlanet TV. We come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we have a planet of 9 billion people by 2038 and possibly 12 to 13 billion by the end of this century, how are we going to be able to take care of all these people on planet Earth? And that's what Emerald Planet's all about. We come to you looking at the solutions, the best practices from around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet. Hello, welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. We're glad to have you. Thank you for being with us.
Looking at the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator, this is led by Raquel Moses. She's the CEO of the accelerator. But they're looking at the creation of new green jobs. And of course, as you have more and more youth being born into the various countries that make up the Caribbean basin, there's always the need for new jobs, but green jobs. This is something that's very near and dear as far as what the accelerator is doing. So Raquel, looking at this 1.5% new green jobs for transformation, people are saying 1.5%? Why that?
So 1.5% is a funny thing. We coined the phrase within the region, the 1.5 to stay alive, to keep our emissions below a particular level so that we don't increase global warming by 1.5%. And so we thought, a play on numbers to have 1.5% to 1.5 to stay alive, but 1.5 is a number that we're already familiar with relating to climate change. And it seems like such a small and innocuous number. So if we can at least just get to 1.5% of new green jobs. So we're saying of the total number of jobs that we have within the region, add 1.5% and do that by bringing innovation to the table. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is an innovation, one of our first projects. It's called source water panels. And they are panels that operate independent of the grid. They create water from sunlight and air. So the solar component of it actually energizes the mechanism, and then it pulls water from the air, it purifies it, and then puts it into an independent supply from the municipal supply. And what that allows us to do is to be more disaster resilient. So if there is a disaster, and this is the children's ward at the University of the West Indies Hospital in Jamaica, then it means that their water is completely safe and without impact if there is a disaster. Yeah. And those are the kinds of things that we need to do.
Well, it's interesting that you're using this innovation. This is really an advanced technology and innovation that you have going there. And the whole thing about it is that you're creating new water. Now you're looking at the Caribbean Sea, the Atlantic Ocean. You're completely surrounded by water. But it's kind of like the old adage of water everywhere and not a drop to drink. Why is it so important that you bring the humidity out of the air, many new sources as far as new water is concerned, as the populations continue to expand, across the Caribbean basin?
Well, what we're seeing now, and that's a great question, what we're seeing now is that the impacts of climate change are with us. A lot of people are talking about, we should try and avoid climate change. It's already happening. There are two things that we have to do. We either need to mitigate against climate change by reducing our carbon emissions, or we need to adapt to the changing environment that we know has already changed. And so this is a part of our adaptation because we're already seeing the impact to our aquifers, the impact to our water supply. So by creating more and new sources of independent water supply, it allows us to create solutions for ourselves as we know it will get drier. It allows us to adapt.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you have this type of system that's very innovative, it's advanced. Actually, this is something that needs to be done in thousands of communities all across the globe in order to bring this pure and clean drinking water so that you have it all the time. And as you're saying, during disasters and other times, is that you really need to always have water because we can do without food. We can do, in some ways, without the power, particularly if you're generating your own renewable power. But water you have to have. So, looking at these technologies, why choose the water and renewable energy as some of your first two emphasis for the accelerator?
Well, we're looking at the things that we're seeing, happening first. And so the first thing that we're seeing happening is this reduction in access to water. We think the next sort of frontier is access to water as the thing that will, be a part of climate justice. So we want to be able to address water really quickly. Now, we didn't create this solution. It's a solution that was created out of the US by a company called Source Water. But what we want to do is we want to be pioneers in the implementation, the repair, and the proliferation of this water so that as it begins to grow across the globe, that we already have the know-how and it's a part of the new green jobs that we create in adaptation solutions and building solutions on top of solutions that are already out there.
And I think this is something that's very important, as far as bringing in these technologies, because what you're doing, you're actually training people now in the technology. How do you adapt? How do you create these technicians within the communities? And then you start building in and start creating your own technologies or enhancing the technologies that you brought in originally from overseas. But looking at these kinds of signings that you're doing with the accelerator, why is it so important that you're taking this kind of leadership with the collaboration, bringing in new technologies, but at the same time to allow your own people to not just survive, but thrive as we move through the 21st century?
So we're the ones on the front line. We're the ones being impacted by climate change now. And so if we don't take a leadership position, we will take a back seat to the changes that are taking place in terms of the action that we require to mitigate the changes that we want to see happen. So this was, I was speaking at a conference of a company called BIT, and they are working to digitize currencies across the region, and they're doing a phenomenal job of doing that. And so by having digital access to money, that means that post-disaster, again, a part of our adaptation strategy, because the storms, we're having 100-year storms happening in 10-year increments. And so access to money post-disaster is so very critical. And so again, taking a leadership role in the digitization of currencies and how that is used at a country level is something that we can do. And we can be the petri dish for how the rest of the world works on the digitization of their currency to increase the impact. And this is at the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. We do a phenomenal job of sort of the co-location of supplies when there are disasters and working with them to look at how do we innovate to ensure that we are up and running even more quickly than with each disaster, that we recover even more quickly. And so these are the kinds of things that we think will make a difference, but will also create jobs that we can then teach how to recover.
Now, looking at this, this notion of impact, when you have a natural disaster, and we're having them more and more in the United States. So, and no matter how big an economy you have, how much wealth you think you've accumulated, how grand your infrastructure may be, you have to realize that Mother Nature it will take its own. And how are you actually bringing all these diverse countries and peoples together to work and share the best of these technologies, these innovations, to make sure that going back to that concept of 90% of renewable energy for all, and how that really all these technologies, it's a 90% for all across all countries, even in disaster recovery.
Yeah, what a phenomenal question, especially as we're looking at this, where this was an event where we were supporting some Blue entrepreneurs. And it really is going to come down to the solutions that we create, the innovation that we enable, and how many people we can get working alongside us on providing new solutions. It's going, there's a saying in Jamaica that you must have heard while you were there, one cocoa full basket. And it talks about the concept of just adding small things together, but ultimately the phenomenal impact that adding those small things together can have.
Right. And the whole thing about, as you bring the elected officials into this and they're educated again, uh, because the countries are small, people really do live together in most cases. And so as you're having these conversations, you're looking at these solutions. How are the politicians, the elected officials, seeing this as not only important for their future to stay in their position, but also as a leapfrog ahead into the future for all the people, for all of the Caribbean countries and territories and dependencies?
I can tell you with quite earnestly that most of them want to do the right thing. They want us to help them to find reasons to do the right thing, or to help enable them to do the right thing. Minister Nigel Clark, that you see there in that photograph, has been tremendous in terms of leading in advocacy and talking about the kinds of changes, but also talking about how we use money and how we use financial innovation to be able to solve problems. When you look at the balance sheets across the region, the some of the decisions that are being made out of necessity, not out of luxury. The cash flows are just not there. So if we can empower people to take more individual decisions and to create more revenue for the region, that is going to translate into more solutions and more action, like that, hurricane resistant infrastructure that we need, needs to be a part of our adaptation strategy.
And I think so too. It's just like looking at this structure right here. Where you're using all steel. This is probably well anchored in steel and concrete to withstand against the hurricanes that you have going throughout the entire region. Is that you're really building for resiliency, and the time to mitigate the disaster is before it ever happens. It's just like
Yes.
the best kilowatt that you can use is the one that you never have to use.
Yeah.
And so hats off to everything that you're doing there. But going to the people, you have young people, well educated, well meaning, dynamic. I mean, you got very vibrant populations, across, the Caribbean area. How are they seeing their future, through innovation? How are they seeing their future as being a part of the solution?
So we're seeing a lot of innovation, but sadly, we're not seeing enough innovation, and we don't have a venture capital ecosystem here. So that's one of the things that we're seeking to create, is to provide more access to innovative capital that will allow entrepreneurs to think outside of the box. What we see a lot is that the entrepreneurs are thinking about how can they apply their solutions within their communities. We need them to think about how they will apply their solutions, not just in their communities, but in the entire country, within the entire region, and across the globe. And sometimes Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, gave a phenomenal speech at the launch of the Pivot Movement, where she talks about, our confidence and the need for us to be more confident in how we execute. And I think that that's where we are. We need to have that confidence, and we need to maintain that audaciousness that we've been talking about, to know that we are the best and the brightest, not just within our communities, but best and the brightest against the best and the brightest anywhere. And so we have the capacity to build solutions that can be exported, that can create the revenue streams that we require to engage in our own protection.
Perfect summary as we create the Emerald Planet.